as Pastor was sharing some things about me. So some people would find it very interesting. I'm a pastor and I'm a NASCAR fan. And my family, growing up, they all worked for General Motors. In fact, they expected me to work for General Motors. Growing up, I lived 3 blocks away from General Motors Engineering Institute. And the dream of the family was that was where I was going to go to school. I was going to become a big-time engineer and work the way up the ladder of General Motors and or some car company and be there. And in fact, my family was so set on my becoming a worker in the automobile industry that when I told them I was going to be a pastor, they said, "Good, you can become a chaplain in an automobile plant." Their world was very limited. But I went as far away from cars as you could imagine. And racing never interested me at all until I met my wife. Your wife. Yeah. My wife and her family are die-hard racing fans. And, the Indianapolis 500 day, Memorial Day weekend was a big holiday. A lot of people do Super Bowls and Thanksgiving stuff. Her family, Memorial Day weekend, you have the Indianapolis 500 that takes place from Indianapolis there, and then in the evening you have the Coca-Cola 600. So it's like 10 hours of racing all in one day. And they would wake up in the morning and I don't know if you've seen those little like scooters that you have to sit on, or they're low to the ground and you move your arms like this, to make them go. My wife's family would have races in the basement of their house. They would time each other to go around in the morning after breakfast. And so my wife's family actually introduced me to racing, and now my boys love racing. And I have family that live in Florida, and we always take 2 days to drive from Pittsburgh to Florida, and about the middle point is Charlotte, North Carolina. And NASCAR Hall of Fame, garages and NASCAR shops all around. And so we'll go and stop and see them and see the race cars and everything. My boys think it's really cool. Yeah, so it's really good. And so that's how I got into racing. And it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Because I see in racing a lot of how people work together when death is on the line. You realize every single day in that occupation, death is on the line. Somebody could die. And I like to think about it when I'm doing my job, because every single day, death is on the line. And how I respond to it will impact whether somebody lives or dies. Amazing. Amazing to think about it. Scary to think about it a lot of times. But it's fun. And I do like the Indian food. Eaten it a few times, not too often. My family's from the Midwest. My wife's family from German descent. Mine's from German and English. And our food's sort of boring. Growing up, it was like meat and potatoes. Yeah, that's what it was. Not a lot of spices and things. And then I spent a year in Thailand and got to like food with flavor. And so I like Indian food. So it's good. So I'm looking forward to lunch. Yeah, breakfast was fantastic. I don't know who's cooking, but you're doing a fantastic job. Yeah, doing a fantastic job. So. At least I'm enjoying it. So, all right. Serving through eternity. Last night we talked a little bit about the the Lord speaking there, the Sermon on the Mount, and how it has to deal with how we treat other people. That was his beginning message to Israel as a nation. And as his ministry is winding down, he once again has a message to share with the people. And in Matthew chapter 25, in this section of Matthew, we have the parable of the 10 virgins, the parable of the talents, the end time scenarios. And right here, at the end of Matthew chapter 25, Jesus is going to talk about the sheep and the goats. In fact, in our scripture reading, and it says, all nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. I think sometimes we have a tendency as people to try to separate the sheep and the goats ourselves. But this gathering is a gathering of people. And only the shepherd is able to determine who's a sheep and who's a goat. It's obvious to him, but it's not obvious to the people. How do we know it's not obvious? Well, we just go down through the story. We can see by their responses that it's not obvious to them. The story continues in verse 34. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world." Isn't that wonderful? He's been preparing a place, not since he died, but since the creation of the world. Oh, get this interesting thing. He started preparing a place before the fall. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. Because you see, God's ideal has always been to be with his people. To never be separate. But the story continues, and he says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord," they're scratching their heads, "when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go and visit you?" The king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Wow. When did we do it? You know, they had no clue as to what they were doing. They were just living their lives to the glory of God. But then the story takes a drastic turn. Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me." They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? And he will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. We cannot separate the sheep and the goats because we all look the same. In fact, in the story, they all thought they looked the same. When did we do it? When, where? How? We don't know. They ask the same questions and different responses. I think sometimes, I think one of my faults as a pastor is that I can be incredibly honest with my congregation. I think sometimes as a church, some of our greatest challenges and greatest faults are that we are a church. You see, we have become so large, and even 16 million so Adventists worldwide, really isn't that big in the scope of things when you think of 1 billion Catholics. Or like 50 million Methodists or something like that. So we're still pretty small, on that scale. But we've become large enough that we have organizations like Adventist Community Services, ADRA, Adventist Development and Relief Agency. Now, not that they're bad, they're not in and of themselves, but we have a tendency now to pull out our phones, 56213, boom, send. $10 just went. Right in the pocket. Well, I did my job. Hope those people from Katrina get a nice house. Yeah. I hope those people in Sudan, get a good education. Yeah. As good as they are, I think sometimes they have allowed us to separate ourselves from getting involved. From allowing us to get our hands dirty. But we can then go to these verses and honestly tell the Lord, when did we see you? We didn't see you do it. We didn't see you hungry. We didn't see you thirsty. We just hit the send button. Or we showed up to church and we put a little extra in the tithe envelope. We didn't see you. We can answer honestly. We didn't see it. We have no clue. But serving each other, Jesus says in this story, is a requirement to what side you stand on. Whether you're a sheep or you're a goat, you will be divided based on how you have served your fellow human being. Wow. It's tough. It was challenging. It's challenging in all of our churches. Let's face it. A lot of us don't see each other but once a week. Right? And sometimes not even that. If you're on a hospital working schedule, sometimes you're at church twice a month or once a month. And you're in and out. And so sometimes we don't even see each other every week. It's a challenge to get together and serve with each other. As I've mentioned, my wife and I are passionate about our young people. My wife is from 4 generations of Adventist educators. great-grandfather knew, or not knew, but sat in the audience at the age of 14 and listened to Ellen White preach. Yeah, she's the Adventist history, in our family. Me and my family were Lutherans. They became Adventists when I was young. I'm a new generation on the other side. But we have a passion for young people. My wife went into education. She taught for 7 years in Michigan before we moved to Pennsylvania. And in Pittsburgh, we're so spread out, we don't have a church school of any kind. Kids, if you're going to church school, you're lucky. You're in a great location. There in the area where you're at, you have church schools, that aren't too far away from you, no matter where you go, for the most part. And one of the prayer requests was praying for one of the schools. Well, Adventist education in Pennsylvania is quite rare. If you go to Harrisburg, right, and you go west in Pennsylvania, from Harrisburg all the way to the state line, there are no Seventh-day Adventist church schools. Right? None. Okay? So we have half a state with no church schools, either in Pennsylvania Conference, Allegheny West Conference, or Allegheny East Conference. Yeah. So there isn't much. So my wife and I were like, okay, what can we do? So we started Pathfinders. We started Adventurers. We actually started Adventurers first. In our church. Now we have like 24 of our kids involved in the program. And it's really grown. We were up here this week with 11 of them. And I try to go with them on all the things. Help with their worship talks and everything. But we're passionate about our young people. And so we wanted to instill in our young people the idea of serving others. Because I'll be honest with you, if you're beyond the age of like 30, you're like next to impossible to change. Okay? Got to get you early. It's not that the Lord can't work miracles, and He does. And He does. But it's a lot easier to move someone that's growing, and mold them. And so my wife was like, okay, we have to come up with a plan to help young people serve. And she said, what better way to have young people serve other young people? So she started looking around for a project that they could do. And she came upon the idea of having all the kids get together and on a Sabbath afternoon after church, a fellowship meal, and we would get together and we would tie fleece blankets. Okay? The material fleece, and we'd cut it, and the kids would tie, because my wife had been doing it for several years with babies' blankets and tying the blankets, and said, I think they could do it. And they would tie the blankets, and then we would take them to the children's hospital to give to kids. And unfortunately, the hospital wouldn't let the kids to come in, to deliver the blankets because of health reasons and letting germs and stuff in. But that first week we invited the church to help us, and we tied that first week probably somewhere around 70 blankets. Okay. That people had donated the material and everything. And I had the privilege as an adult and stuff, I got to take the blankets to the hospital. Okay? We ended up washing them. Okay? We would take them and wash them, and then we would put them in plastic bags and seal them so that they were all, germ-free. They could go in and a little pack, and we've actually made now a label that goes on it, a gift to you from the Pittsburgh Seventh-day Adventist Church, the Steel City Pathfinders and Adventurers, and So we took it into the hospital. That week we received a letter, and I received a phone call from the letter, or follow-up from the letter, because they wanted to make sure we got the message. The blankets went into the hospital, and they were distributed amongst the wards. And a little girl, age 11, was in the hospital for another surgery. Her spine was not healing the way it should. She was not growing, and she would have to have continual surgeries as she grew. And at age 11, she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. She had decided that life was enough. 11. The family was distraught. The doctors were distraught. They didn't know what to do. How can we help her? You know, she's only 11. She shouldn't feel like this. Nurse said, just a minute. Nurse walked out of the room, went back to the nurse's station, picked out one of those bags, brought it in to the room there, and said, oh, I want to let you know, there's a group of kids that made this blanket for you. They made it special just for you. Little girl looked at it. She opened it up, and she goes, it's my favorite color. She put a smile on her face, and they said that her attitude and demeanor changed in that moment. She went on to okay and have another surgery. The aunt wrote a letter to the church, and then she called me that week. And she said, I just want to let you know your blanket saved the life of my niece. No clue. No clue at all. To make matters, what do you want to say, bad for my wife, fellas, it's probably good if you talk to your wife before you make big announcements. And if you're not married yet, listen to the lady. Talk to them first. You know, before you. I got up front at church the next Sabbath, and I was sharing this story. Tears streaming down my face. And I said, because of that, the project of doing blankets is not going to be one time. I said, we're going to do the blankets now every month. In fact, I said, this year, we're going to do 1,000 blankets. My wife sits on the second row back with my boys. And she's sitting there and she looked at me, she goes, because she came to me afterwards, she said, do you know how expensive fleece is? She said, where are we going to get the money? You know, where are we going to, I said, I have no idea. None whatsoever. You know, because fleece is actually made from petroleum. We know what the barrel prices have done. You know, well, guess what? Fleece prices go up with it. So that first year, we ended up making 1,000 blankets, and now we've been making blankets for 9 years. And we probably average around 650 to 700 blankets a year. It's slowed down a little bit. We don't really make them a whole lot for the children's hospital anymore, because we have 2 competing hospital systems in our city. And Children's Hospital is actually run by the largest hospital system, and they get a lot of donations from a lot of things all the time. The other hospital system gets nothing. Okay? They don't get any help with their children's wards or anything. And so we actually supply blankets for their children's wards for all children that come through them. And we hardly know at all what happens. We make them, someone washes them, we deliver them. No clue. No clue. We don't know what they're doing. Occasionally, we'll get a card, a phone call, or a letter. But the children's coordinator of the hospital we do have a couple of people that work in that hospital, and they will see her occasionally. And she will say, "It's unbelievable." She said, it's so unbelievable what's happening with these blankets. And they said, "Well, what's happening with the blankets?" She said, "Well," she said, "when I'm giving out the blankets, I always ask the kids what color they want or what pattern or what design, whatever." She said, "And even if I only have one blanket left before the next delivery," she said, "I never fail to have the exact right one that's needed." You see, we buy fleece on sale. We don't make a list. There might be a month we have 30 yards of pink, and 2 yards of blue. And that month, the Lord knows. Almost all of the patients will be girls who want pink. And maybe a couple of boys. Right. But it's amazing because my wife said, "Don't you realize that we can't, do that?" She said, "No." She said, "It's a God thing." So even the people at the hospital are believing it's a God thing. Amen. Unbelievable. What you do for others. I don't say that to brag because I believe that was a total God thing that He gave our church there. And 70% of our congregation are involved in one way or another in that service ministry. I thought about stopping it one time. And I had a lady come to me and said, "You can't stop it because of my mother who's a shut-in." I said, "Your mother's a shut-in? The blanket, we tie once a month after our fellowship meal, everybody get together, we have good time fellowship. What does your mother have to do with it? She's a shut-in." She said, "Oh, no, you don't understand." She said, "We buy fleece during the week, and she ties it at home and feels she's a part of the church." Just amazing. It's amazing. But thank you. I'm not here to tell you a story about our church. I'm here to try to inspire you to serve others. Because eternity is in the balance. In Matthew chapter 8, I want to tell a story. I first came upon this story in a book called Just Like Jesus by Max Lucado, or Lucado, however you want to say it. It's in the first 4 verses of Matthew chapter 8, and I'm going to take some liberties with it and tell more than what is written. For 5 years, no one has touched me. No one. Not my wife, not my daughter, not my friends, no one. Oh, I've seen the look of pity on their faces, but no one has touched me. Not once has anyone touched me. What's common to you? A handshake, a kiss from your spouse, A brush of the cheek as somebody moves the hair out of your face. A brush of the shoulder as you walk beside someone. Or just bumping into someone in a crowded room. Oh, how I have craved to even be bumped by someone in a room. But no one has touched me. Not once. In fact, I am not even allowed to be on the streets with other people. Even the rabbis keep their distance from me. I'm not even permitted in my own synagogue. And I've even been made to leave my own home. I was untouchable. I was a leper and no one touched me until today. I relive that summer 5 years ago, working in the fields with a sigh. I remember going out to the fields and cutting down the hay and straw, gathering it up, and I remember the fingertips starting to go numb. It continually got worse until it came a day when I would hold the sigh and I didn't even realize I was holding it. I would look down at my hand and think that it could be someone else's. I couldn't even feel it in my own hand. I tried to keep it from my wife's notice, but how could she not notice it? I carried my hand next to my body like a wounded bird, just so that I could feel the hand against my body. She had to have noticed. That day, I remember coming in from the field and a basin filled with water there, and I would put my hands into the water to wash my face, and as I did, the water turned a bright red. As I looked down at my hand, and a gash ran down my thumb. Blood oozing out, and I didn't even know it. I must have caught it on something. Maybe I hit it with the sigh at some point. Maybe I just, ripped it across some of the hay. I don't know. But there my hand was bleeding, filling the bowl with blood. My wife was standing behind me, and softly I heard her say, "Would you like me to go with you to see the priest?" No, I said, "I think I should go alone. I will go." So I wrapped up my hand as best I could and walked over by the door and looked at my wife, and I reached over and touched her with my good hand as she reached up and touched me. And our eyes were moist with tears. It was the last time someone would touch me for the last 5 years. Until today. I went to see the rabbi, and I know he was just doing his job. There he was, he saw my hands wrapped in a bandage, and he took one look at me. And he put a hand over his mouth, and he put his palm out in front of me, and he made the pronouncement, "Unclean!" Unclean. I remember walking out of the place there to the edge of town, and by then my wife was there with my daughter. She sat down, a basket there with some food and some coins and some changes of clothing for me. Neighbors had gathered around as well, other friends and family members, and they just stood there. And I could see the terror and pity on their faces. Terror because they wondered how long the infection had been going, and were they infected? Pity because they knew I would have to be separated from them, from my wife and my 3-year-old daughter. I moved outside town to the leper colony. Oh, what stench! Oh, I know some parents complain about their children and how often they change their clothes or not, and you know everything. But try living in a leper colony with not only unchanged clothes, but rotting flesh. The stench is horrendous. I remember being up at night and just looking at the stars in the sky and yelling out to God, "What did I do to deserve this? I'm a farmer, a husband, just a man. At least I used to be. What did I do to deserve this?" If we would leave the area, we had to have a bell around our necks that would ring as we would walk. We didn't need it, though, because as soon as somebody would see us, everyone would start yelling, "Unclean, unclean, unclean," and run away. Fear. A couple of weeks ago, I decided to take a chance and to walk out. By now, both hands were crippled up. I was going out and lost part of an ear and part of my nose. But I had to look once again upon what my farm was looking like. What did my farm look like? What did the city look like? What was it like? When I got there, I hid behind a tree, and I could see the fields, and it looked like they were being kept up, which was good. I saw some children playing there in the field. Oh, what joy they had playing there together. As I watched them, I started to feel energy coming back to my own body. And I stepped out from behind the tree and sort of stood up, and one of the kids said, "Ah, look out! Unclean!" They started running. But one little child, one little girl stopped. She paused and turned and looked at me. I thought maybe, just maybe, that might be my daughter. Maybe, just maybe, it's a little girl looking for her father. I turned quickly to leave. It's that moment, though, that gave me the courage to do what I did today. Heard the rumbling about the man named Jesus. About Jesus who had been healing all kinds of people. I heard he was going to be coming through our area, and so I went out near where the road was and hid behind a large rock so no one could see me. I could hear the crowd start to come down over the hill and start to come down the path. And as I thought they were close enough, I leapt out from behind the rock and just fell on the ground and said, "Master." Immediately, some of those that were near Jesus saw me, and right away, some of them started to shout, "Unclean!" Fathers were grabbing their little children and pulling them behind them, and women were covering their faces and turning away. And I said, "Master, if you are willing, will you heal me?" I will never forget the moment, because Jesus walked toward me. Oh, if he would have healed me with a word, I would have rejoiced. If he would have healed me with a prayer, I would have leapt for joy. But Jesus came to me and touched me. For the first time in 5 years, someone touched me. And then he said, "I am willing. Be healed." Immediately, I could feel the tingle in my hands. I could feel once again, as I started to unravel, and look at my hand made whole. And then Jesus reached down, took both of his hands and clasped me on either side, and then brought me close to him, where I could even feel his breath on my face. And he said, "Don't tell anyone, but go and show yourself to the priest and offer up the gift that Moses commanded you. Go." I ran. I just stopped to talk with you, because I'm going to show myself to the priest, and I'm going to give him a big hug. Then I'm going to go home, I'm going to give my wife a big hug. And I'm going to pick up my now 8-year-old daughter and swing her in the air. Because today, someone touched me. And I have been changed. Jesus is going to separate the sheep from the goats. And he is looking for people who are willing, get this, who are even willing to go against the law. Guess what? Do you realize Jesus went against the law in touching that leper? But he is looking for people who are willing to touch others for eternity's sake. It doesn't have to be a Bible study. It doesn't have to be an evangelistic series. But he wants people to touch others with love and genuine care. And I hope that as you go back, that you will gently, lovingly touch those in your family, those in your neighborhood, those at work. Look for people that need the touch of Jesus Christ. And then one day it'll become such a habit, you won't even realize you're doing it anymore. And look at the Lord and say, when did I do that? And he'll say, when you did it from one of the least of these, you did it.